Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about why it's kind of a myth, and I'll break down why it's a myth, that using a lot of cardio to help you lose body fat over time will eventually stop working, cause stalls, things like that. Because a lot of that theory is based upon kind of the delusions and problems that people have sometimes in the physique world, bikini competitors, men's physique, things like that. The problems that they run into trying to cut ultra lean, dangerously lean, kind of carries over to everyone else, and the reality is that's not actually how it works. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skill about my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Alright guys, the reality is when we're talking about body fat loss, I want to keep this on the topic of not people's contest prep, because I don't advocate people get down to 5% body fat, 6% body fat. I think it's insanely dangerous. I think it's stupid to do so, and I don't advocate it because that's not what this channel is about. But so we're talking about, when I'm talking about lean, something like 10% body fat for men, 15% body fat for women. Nice athletic level of leanness as far as your fat loss goes, not trying to get ultra shredded. Because a lot of the metabolic slowdown that people see trying to get ultra shredded, and when they start running into a lot of these stalls, tends to be due to muscle loss, because they tried to cut leaner than their body is really willing to allow them to get without a bunch of drugs to hold on to muscle. Or they've just tried to cut too quickly because they get too obsessed with doing it too fast. They lose muscle mass and their metabolism, their TDE, everything else starts to slow down. It's not the cardio per se causing it. There's also the things that you have to factor in with the psychological component of it, because you do see that a lot. You'll see prep coaches, and we see a lot of them say, well, I've had multiple clients who cut their calories really low, did huge amounts of cardio, then their weight loss completely stalled. Well, number one, there's the cortisol factor, meaning the body might still be burning body fat, but the extra cortisol due to the stress and everything else might be causing water retention, which masks itself as stalls and weight loss, even though you're in a calorie deficit and you're losing weight. And you can't forget that. When we are talking about fat loss, sometimes when you do things or you bump something up because you panic, your weight loss might seem to stall when in fact you've actually lost several pounds of body fat, but the scale will stall and sometimes even go up. And a lot of that has to do with your body trying to reach homeostasis and retaining water. And then again, what happens for people who really have an emotional attachment to all this, this creates distress for them, creates anxiety. They think that their fat loss is stalled. They panic. They do something else. They do something then drastic or dramatic and end up losing mass, having extra emotional problems, lethargy problems, injuries, everything else. And that's really common in certain circles. But when you step back and you look at the way that this really works, this doesn't happen to usually serious athletes who are focused correctly. They don't have those problems, the same emotional problems there with the emotional attachment to the scale. And we don't have the issues in with the binge eating, because an athlete is never going to go into a large caloric deficit. Someone who's concerned with holding on to performance and using a lot of physical activity to lean out probably isn't going to try to cut as dramatically. They're not going to have the binge eating, and that's the other factor too. A lot of these people whose weight loss has stalled are binging due to being put into starvation mode. Starvation mode doesn't make your metabolism slow down. Starvation mode makes you psychotic. It makes you delusional. And there's data on this, there's research on this. Delusional in the sense of you'll eat the whole cake and forget that you ate it. That's what I mean by delusional. It creates actual gaps in your memory. People can't remember what they actually ate. They really thought they were on a 1,500 calorie diet when they're eating a 1,200 calories that they're forgetting to track every day, and legitimately and truly don't know and remember that they ate it. All right, that's what we're talking about. And that is what happens when people do these dramatic cuts. What you usually see for athletes who increase their overall energy, their cardio, their endurance work, physical activity because they want to drop a weight class, or they're just simply upping their activity but they're keeping the calories relatively high and they're still weight training, they tend to get leaner and leaner, and they don't stop getting leaner until they actually get at a fairly lean threshold, depending upon what their diet looks like. And the reason for that is because if they're holding onto their muscle mass, and there's a difference, guys. Go look at athletes who are highly conditioned, who do a lot of endurance work, who also lift weights. They don't have that skinny fat look that people are thinking of with some marathon runners. Go look at marathon runners who are hybrid athletes and who do powerlifting and weightlifting too. They're usually pretty peeled. A lot of triathletes, they're pretty peeled. They're jacked. They don't look skinny fat. They're not bodybuilder big, but they're big. Look at some of Alex Viada's hybrid athletes. Some of these guys are sub 10% body fat and still holding very substantial amounts of lean mass, right? They're pretty decent sized guys. Well, Alex Viada's one of them. Look at him. Guy's like 220 peeled. Power lifter who runs super marathons. So what you need to understand is that at a certain threshold, you don't see body fat loss stop when the carbs are kept high, fat's kept in moderation, and people are doing very, very large volumes of conditioning work. The reason for that is because there's a nutrient partitioning effect, and because they're weightlifting and strength training with it, consuming enough protein with it, athletes who do this, they don't lose muscle mass. And if you don't lose muscle mass, metabolism doesn't slow down as much. Furthermore, if they increase physical activity to do this and the scale starts going down because of body fat loss, it doesn't necessarily stall. And the reason I say that is because, as we know from all the data, what happens the more endurance work and more conditioning work you do as you adapt to it and acclimate to it. Number one, your ability to burn more calories in a given period of time increases, right? So if you're doing 3 hours of cardio a day, we'll use that. We'll use the example of what I've been doing. If you're doing 3 hours of cardio a day, you started at an hour or 30 minutes and you built up, eventually you will get to a point to where your work capacity improves, and you will find that you're actually able to pedal harder on your bike or run slightly faster for that 2 or 3 hours than you had been doing. Well, if you do that, even if the scale is going down, what happens? Your caloric output increases. So you actually will find that sometimes your old hour of cardio might only be burning 10 or 20% less calories than your new hour of cardio does at your new level of conditioning. Even though your scale may have gone down a few pounds, your work capacity is increased, and as work capacity increases, your ability to generate more output increases. That doesn't happen on people who are severely restricting calories because they're running out of energy, but athletes who are doing this and keeping particularly carbohydrate intake elevated, keeping calories high, actually on still a high calorie diet, but not in a surplus, or maybe even in a small deficit, but still eating a lot of calories, their energy output goes up per hour of training and conditioning work, cardio, endurance, whatever they're doing. It increases over time. So if your output is increasing, you shouldn't see stalls in fat loss. Furthermore, there's an additional nutrient partitioning effect, particularly if protein and calories and weight training are kept high enough to hold on to your muscle mass. Nutrient partitioning increases, insulin sensitivity increases. As insulin sensitivity increases, your carbs tend to go more to be stored in muscle tissue. Your chance of de novo lipogenesis starts to regress, meaning storing carbs as fat will actually go down over time, even on a very high carb diet, particularly while doing the cardio, and your body will tend to burn more and more fat for fuel as you become more conditioned. So that's the big difference too. That's one of the other reasons, even on very, very high calorie diets, you see a lot of these athletes who do hours and hours of endurance work get leaner and stay very, very lean even when they're eating enormously high calories. And again, a lot of it has to do with that nutrient partitioning effect. It is an energy turnover thing, but it's also a nutrient partitioning thing. Meaning is if they end up burning more fat than they're consuming, and I know people say, but it's calories in, calories out. You're right for the average person, but when you're talking about people who are doing large volumes of conditioning work, who actually are athletes or training like athletes, there are metabolic tricks at play. And yeah, if they're eating mostly carbs, but they're burning mostly fat for fuel, yes, you'll see some de novo lipogenesis. You will see different things like that occur. They will still be burning some carbs for fuel because they have to, because the body's, that's what it's getting for fuel. But they will sometimes continue to lose body fat even when they're not in a caloric deficit. Even if they're pretty much at maintenance type calories, sometimes they will continue to lose body fat very, very slowly and get leaner over time, purely because of the nutrient partitioning and the fact that they are burning such enormous amounts of calories for fat calories a day. You know, when you're burning something like 1,500 or 2,000 fat calories every day during your conditioning work, and you're not eating enough fat to compensate for it, only so much of the extra carbs that you're eating in that mix is going to get stored as fat in comparison. You're going to still find most of the time there's a threshold to where even when they're eating very large amounts of food and not really losing scale weight, that body fat stores will tend to slowly go down. And if they're holding on to body weight, it's due to either some small amount of muscle growth or the muscles themselves storing more glucose, more glycogen, more triglyceride stores, stuff like that. And that's what's keeping their weight constant sometimes. So again, you have to understand that when activity and conditioning work go very, very high, when we're talking the way that athletes train, not the average gym rat who works out an hour a day and maybe does 30 minutes of cardio. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you're using large volumes of cardio, particularly as a weight management tool. Yeah, you actually shouldn't see stalls in your fat loss. They might slow down a little bit here and there, but the fat loss will actually tend to go on for very long periods of time, and people will oftentimes reach even a certain threshold to where they'll continue to get leaner with minimal weight loss, even sometimes when they're on 3,000, 3,500 calories, 4,000 calories, depending on what they do. And again, you need to understand there is a nutrient partitioning effect there for people who are very, very conditioned, who combine conditioning work with weight training. Again, people who are training, actually very seriously. And I'm not saying that's what's going to work for people who go and do 30 minutes of cardio a day, but we're talking about people who do a lot of it. It's a totally different method. So that someone had asked me already, well, what are you going to do when your fat loss stops? And it's like, I'm eating a low-fat, clean diet and doing 3 hours of cardio a day. It's pretty unlikely that my fat loss is going to stop at any point. It'll stop when basically I up the calories or back the cardio down. And so that will give me control over it. Or if any given point I finally say, okay, I'm at an amount of body fat I want to be at, maybe I need to cut down to 2 hours or an hour and a half of cardio a day. And that would be a viable solution. But quite frankly, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. And it's based upon observations, clinical work that's been done on various athletes, observing athletes in the real world. Most of these athletes who are very, very conditioned rarely ever regain body fat at any point during their competitive careers, and some of them continue to get leaner and leaner, even if it's only a few ounces a year, sometimes for years on end once they're already lean. It's actually quite common among very conditioned athletes, and it does have to do with the total energy turnover and the fact that their metabolisms and energy turnover isn't reducing because they're not losing muscle and they're not starving themselves. Big difference. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.